organized study, and, you know, all the different kinds of things that go with being able to organize your time and carry out tasks. And the third one is college cultural capital, and that has to do with understanding what it takes to get yourself to college, to make a good college selection, to apply for financial aid, to, once you're at the college, find your way around and get the kinds of help you need to be successful. So every student needs work in each of these areas while they're still in high school. And if these kinds of things combine well, you end up with kind of a momentum chain. So the report I'm talking about, we put these together into what could be kind of a tool to monitor students' progress toward being college ready. The idea was that everybody should accumulate experiences, as I mentioned, but also attainment. So there are certain kind of things you just need to live, and there are certain kinds of things that you need to have attained or accomplished or be able to kind of check off. And I'm going to go through these now and talk with you about them, and then discuss some of the research that goes into some of those. So academic knowledge and skills, you know, number one is participating in a rigorous core curriculum. That's something that Edelman and many others have shown to be probably the most important predictor of being able to be doing well in college. And really that means taking the courses that are required to be college ready. Even if you don't necessarily do super well in them, just taking those courses is important. Secondly, taking college level courses while you're still in high school, such as dual enrollment, AP, IB, International Baccalaureate. So those are experiences that can be important to students on the pathway to being ready for college. And then as far as attainments, being able to show that you're college ready in math and English by the time you finish high school, earning a good high school GPA, and accruing 6 college credits in high school. Those are the attainments that can be considered to be especially important in this area in terms of being college ready. Now the ones that are in lavender here are ones that I'm going to talk about further in the research section. I just want to lay out this framework for you first. So then when it comes to am I connected?
We can hear you now.
You're back. You're back.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. All right. So have I just been chatting along to myself for all this time?
For the past couple of slides, Elizabeth. So right there. No, next slide.
There?
Yeah.
Okay.
We heard you up until then.
All right. Well, that's a relief.
Or through most of it.
All right.
Okay.
So I will keep going from here. And yeah, thanks, Joel. Joel was led the project that this work that I'm talking about right now is based on, Joel Vargas from Jobs for the Future. So thank you for that. And so yeah, let me resume here. Yeah, so I was saying basically that, you know, there are these 3 areas of college readiness that we're concerned with in this piece of work, and that the most important there are all sorts of ways that students can be can have the experiences or attainments that would show that they're college ready in this area, but the 5 that are listed here are based in rigorous research and I think also through practical experience have been shown to be very important. So the first is taking a rigorous core curriculum in high school. That's something that Edelman and others have shown to be absolutely critical, and by that it's basically meant, you know, taking those core general education higher level courses that are considered college preparatory, and they encourage students to be placed in those courses even if they're maybe not the most you know, the most academically proficient students. Now, secondly, we have taking college-level courses while in high school, and that includes dual enrollment, AP, international baccalaureate courses that can expose students to the norms and rigors of the college curriculum. So those are the 2 experiences that are highlighted here. As far as attainments, being college ready in math and English by the time of graduation, earning a good high school GPA, and accruing 6 college credits while in high school. So students who can check those off all the way down are probably in pretty good shape for moving on. And one thing I should mention is the items here that are in purple are ones that I'm going to address further on in terms of giving you more information about the actual research behind them. There are also non-cognitive skills, time management, knowing how to organize yourself, to study, knowing how to work in small groups, you know, work in groups, communicate your needs, things like that. But one of them that turns out to be very important is the opportunity to establish your goals for the future. So goals meaning future education, careers, where you're going, and you know, that giving relevance to your current education. Also, opportunities to develop non-cognitive skills, which in some schools are built into the courses. Teachers work together to make sure that students are getting the chance to actually practice some of these non-cognitive skills. Good attendance is an important attainment, a good indicator of likely success in the future. And so is showing readiness on a non-cognitive assessment. So that's something schools can administer to students to make sure that they're actually on track to being college ready in terms of non-cognitive skills. And finally, college cultural capital. So having a chance to be actually exposed to college norms and expectations in college, that can happen, in high school, that can happen through dual enrollment courses. It can happen through going to the college campus and spending time there. Sometimes, you know, spending time in labs or, you know, college activities and so on. Validation by high school and college faculty, so having interactions with faculty where they show that they believe in students and their potential as scholars. Completing 1 or more college applications in the FAFSA, this financial aid, student financial aid form, and then actually submitting paperwork showing that you're going to attend a college. So, you know, we hear about summer melt, but when students have actually turned in some paperwork before they leave college, they're at least somewhat more likely to go ahead and go to college. Of course, you know, there are other things that can be done too. So we suggest using some kind of a tool like this so that guidance counselors, advisors, others could actually be kind of checking in with students about these kinds of experiences and attainments and making sure that they're, you know, kind of falling into place or being encouraged during their period in high school, and also for use with high school staff, with teachers and leaders at the high school, to make sure that students are getting these kinds of opportunities. So that's kind of the framework I wanted to put out there, but I wanted to talk about some specific kinds of programs or activities that research has shown to be effective and that you may want to consider. one of these is developmental summer bridge programs, which is a type of summer bridge program that was being offered in Texas for a number of years. And I was part of a team that did research at 8 different colleges. It was through the National Center for Post-Secondary Research. So we had 3 components to the study. We went into each of these programs and basically spent time looking around, talking to students, trying to understand what they were offering students. There was also a random assignment study of student outcomes to figure out whether students who were in these programs did better than students who were not. And the way we were able to do that is that these programs were well subscribed. A lot of students applied, so the ones who ultimately the ones who were chosen to participate were chosen by lottery, and so there was an opportunity to compare their outcomes with students who weren't chosen to participate. We also did a cost study to understand what this would cost. So all of these programs were for students just coming out of high school. They were all sponsored by and located on a college campus. They were all 4 to 5 week interventions, and they all offered instruction in math, English, and or reading that was college preparatory. In other words, it was pretty similar to what students would take if they went to the college and were considered not quite ready. Each of the programs also had academic and student services support. Sometimes those were peer mentors, slightly older students who were working with the ones in the program. Sometimes they had tutors available in the classrooms. Sometimes students went to writing centers and that kind of thing. They all had a college knowledge component, an actual short curriculum that taught students about college. And the students got a stipend to make sure that they were able to attend one of these bridge programs rather than going to a summer job. And it also motivated them to complete because they didn't get the full amount unless they completed. So for the study, we ended up with almost 800 students in the program group, a little over 500 in the control group. The next column that says started, those are the students who were selected and actually began the program. So there was some drop-off. But if they started the program, they pretty much always finished. So about 95% of those who started the program finished. And this is what we found, that we had thought that maybe these kinds of programs would be so powerful that they would have an impact on the big outcomes. But we didn't really find that. So it didn't make any difference in whether students enrolled in college or persisted. And maybe these were students who would have, were planning to go to college anyway. And it also didn't make any difference. It didn't have an impact on the number of credits that they earned over 2 years. But it did help them to get through the initial college-level math and writing courses in the first year. So that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that it can't be just one program. It has to probably be, something like a summer bridge with, some extra help during, say, the first year of college. But this shows you the results. So this was looking at students. The black bars there are students who are in the program group, who are in the summer bridges, and the white bars are students who are in the control group. And if you look at, these are all students who entered college in the fall of 2009. If you look at the 2010 outcomes, what you'll see is that a lot more students in the program group, in the bridge group, had passed their college-level math course. So 32% had passed their college-level math course as compared to 22%. And that difference continued up, during the length of the study, which was, for 5 semesters. So we were able to follow these students. And we had a fairly similar story with college-level writing. So this is basically passing their Comp 101 class. So you can see that the program group was significantly more likely to pass College 101 courses at each level. So, that was good news, and, and it seemed like a very positive thing. At the same time, we had to, we were looking at the cost of these programs, and what we found is that they weren't cheap. They were costing a fair amount to run. It depended on the site. Some of them were more expensive than others. You know, there was a student stipend, as I mentioned, and so that was that made a difference. But at the same time, you know, it was still kind of quite a lot of money, and really there weren't that many students being served. You know, it was only something that fairly, you know, they took a lot to get the number of students into the program that were there, and then, you know, they weren't very large groups of students. So it kind of led us to do a fair amount more thinking about whether there would be other ways to help students to be college ready that would be perhaps built into the regular school year. So we did some research on other ways of helping students to prepare, and the next project I'm going to talk about was looking at early college readiness assessments and transition courses. Early college readiness assessments being assessments, you know, often the 11th grade state assessment. It could be an ACT, it could be in some cases the colleges were actually administering their placement tests in the high school. But one way or another, there was a measurement that was allowing students to know whether they were on track to be college ready by the time they graduated. And for students who weren't, well, you know, in some cases, different kinds of transition curricula were offered, and these were generally 11th or 12th grade courses, sometimes, you know, tutorials or online programs and so on, that had been developed jointly between high school and college faculty. So it wasn't just the high school meeting the high school standards or the college meeting the college standards. It was really, you know, a joint effort with the idea that ultimately what they wanted was for students to be college ready according to the college's criteria. So in the context of middle and early colleges, this might be a little bit different, right? In some cases, you have students who are, you know, you're hoping to have in college classes by 10th, 11th, 12th grade. These kinds of transition courses might be something that would be useful for students who just need a little bit of extra help to be ready for those first college level courses. So going back to early college readiness assessments, the idea was just knowing might be something that could be helpful in making sure that students use that senior year as fully as possible. And there is some evidence to support that. There was a group in California that did some research on California's early assessment program that was set up specifically to inform students about whether or not they were on track to being college ready. And students who took that assessment, just knowing, I mean, that was the only intervention that was offered that was explicitly attached to this project. Just knowing made the likelihood of their taking remedial courses in college considerably less, so 6% in English and 4% in math. So, you know, so that was encouraging. And, you know, we also were interested in looking at these transition courses, and, you know, the thinking was, okay, well, maybe you can make sure by 12th grade that everybody is college ready. You know, you've identified those students who are not on track to be college ready. Maybe it's not going to cost you anything extra. And, you know, since it's a regular high school senior course offering high school credit, if it's designed with the college, it should meet their criteria for college readiness. And ideally, it might include an actual mechanism to place out of developmental education. So the college might recognize that any student who passed that course would be actually college ready. And that, you know, that's what we do find in some places. And it's something that, you know, can be done within the context of early colleges as well. If there's an English course, say, or a math course that the college considers to be, you know, preparing students for their first college level course. So the evidence on this, we've had some promising descriptive results, and we're just beginning to get more rigorous research results on this. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we're seeing. Before I go any further, though, are there any questions or anybody have any comments about this?
Great info for me, Marlene. This is really good information for me. Thank you very much.
Oh, good. So glad to hear it. Thanks. All right, well, let's keep going and yeah, jump in any time. So what we did next is we did a 50-state scan to see who was doing these early college readiness assessments and whether there were states that had transition curricula. And what we found, and this is back in 2012, and we're actually in the process of updating this right now, mainly by reaching out to people at the state level and state government who could, tell us whether this is part of what's going on in states. And what we are seeing actually is there are a lot of states that are starting to put these kinds of ideas into policy. So back in 2012, about half of the states had some kind of 11th grade test with a college readiness benchmark, and others were, there were some local places where that was being done. A lot of times that was the college going in and offering a placement test, and some that were thinking about it. And as far as states with transition curricula, at that point there were 8 where it was a statewide initiative, 21 where we found some kind of local groups that were working on it, and 9 where it was in progress. So, it was definitely out there. We'll have more information in about 6 months updating this chart. But we wanted to do more in-depth research in some of the states where more was going on. So we worked in California, New York, Tennessee, and West Virginia, and did visits to the schools to try to understand the different designs and so on. And I just want to share information from the 2 states where we also did, or, well, just from the 2 of the states that were in the study. So in New York, in New York City, they've had a program called At Home in College. It's since changed names. I can't remember the new name. And it's designed and administered by CUNY's collaborative programs. They work with they did work with 62 participating high schools. I believe it's somewhat fewer now. But high schools that signed on, they would work with them to use a curriculum in English and or a curriculum in math that was explicitly designed to be a college-ready curriculum that were, developed in both cases, primarily by CUNY faculty. And students were placed into these programs by their scores on the Regents exams, which are New York State's not only 11th grade, but basically end-of-course exams for certain kinds of courses. So one thing that was interesting is that in their English class, one semester focused on psychology topics and the other semester focused on sociology topics. So students were getting exposed to college-level material in those 2 areas, and those are also areas that lend themselves to a fair number of discussions about current events and, human interaction and topics that students might be expected to enjoy. And then the math course was a little more traditional and more directly oriented to making sure that students could pass the placement test when they finished. So we did a study looking at student outcomes. We were most interested in their readiness in college-level courses in math and English and actually passing a gatekeeper course, but we also looked at some other outcomes. And what we found, this was the math results, and I guess these could be considered positive but not overwhelming. What we think is that there were probably a lot of other things going on, and that in some cases the students who were expected to be in these courses weren't really, so that kind of had to do with the research methodology and so on. But you can see that there was a slight increase in the percentage of students who, or a slight difference in the students who took these courses as compared to students who did not take the course when it came to passing their gatekeeper, in other words, their first college-level math course within a year. And if you look over to college-level credits earned with one year, they were also likely to have about 1 more college credit. And in English, the results were a little confusing in that they were 2% more likely to pass a gatekeeper course within a year, but they were less likely to be deemed college ready, which maybe have something to do with the tests that were used. But in any case, we were pleased to see that students were more likely to pass a gatekeeper course, meaning the English 101 course, and they were also more likely to have earned a college-level credit within 1 year. So, as I said, these initiatives are somewhat new, so there's still work going on to make sure that they can live up to their potential, I think. But one place that a lot of people are talking about is the approach that's being used in Tennessee, which is the Seamless Alignment and Integrated Learning Support, or SAILS. And this is something that was started by Chattanooga Community College along with Red Bank Community College. So one particular college high school partner just got together and decided to do this, and then it kind of took off all over the state. But what they were doing at the college level, they were offering developmental education in the lab, basically. It was through my math lab, and so they had 5 different modules. The students passed all those 5 modules, they would be considered college level. So they offered that course to the high schools, and they would have a high school teacher that was supervising it, but it was, run by the college, and the college was checking in regularly. Student placement was based on their ACT in the 11th grade. Everybody in the state took in the 11th grade. So students were, I think the cutoff was 17, if I remember right. And then if students actually passed those 5 modules, they would be considered to be college level. Now, what was happening at Red Bank is some students were passing them in the first semester of the year, and then they were offered to take dual enrollment math at the college in the 2nd semester. So that was pretty motivating for some of those students. At this point, this program is being implemented very widely throughout the state. And, what people are finding, one thing that's kind of interesting, and this is some work done by one of my colleagues, is that students in the high school are a whole lot more likely to complete these modules than college students. So if you're taking the same set of modules at the college, the colleges that she looked at, it was between 47 and 65% of students were completing, while 79 to 97% of students who were taking it in the high school were completing. And her takeaway was that it was possible to provide a lot of the supports at the high school that are less likely to typically happen at the college. So students were, one thing is they were meeting every day, they were in a classroom together, they were helping each other out, they were always there with the same students, the high school faculty was paying a lot of attention, they just seemed to be a lot in place that was helping them to complete. So, doing that college readiness work in high school seems to have that extra advantage. Now, a colleague of ours, Angela Boatman, is doing rigorous research on them right now, and what she's found, that work is still in progress. What she's found is that students in the SAILS program are more likely to graduate high school, and they're more likely to enroll in college, which is kind of interesting. And it may have to do with them knowing that it's a program at the high school that puts them on track to college. It's probably some of the same power that comes through middle and early college high schools, where students just know that they are college material because they're taking a college course. So I wanted to move on and share just a little bit of information about dual enrollment as well. I'm pretty sure that people on the phone are very familiar with dual enrollment, but you may not be as familiar with some of the research behind it, so I thought I would include that as well, because it has some really solid research evidence behind it. So I don't think we'll spend time on the definitions here. But these are some findings of one of my colleagues, Melinda Karp, who did some work with some other researchers in Florida, looking at the ways that dual enrollment can influence outcomes. And what she found was kind of impressive that, students who are participating in dual enrollment, and these are students who are matched against very similar students, through the study. In other words, they were the same in terms of their high school, in terms of their academic achievement, demographics, a range of other characteristics. So they were more likely to graduate high school, more likely to enroll in college, more likely to persist once they're in college. They had higher GPAs in college. And they accumulated considerably more credits in the 3 years after high school graduation, so 15 credits. So, those are all, pretty impressive statistics. And one thing that, is worth coming back to often is that, while the benefits were there for everybody, male students and low-income students were more likely to get a bump. They were more likely to benefit from dual enrollment participation. And there's also some good research by On that came out in 2012 showing, and this is extending the research out to actual post-secondary completion, which wasn't in the previous study. So this said that dual enrollment students are 8 percentage points more likely to earn a post-secondary degree and 7 percentage points more likely to earn a BA. And when we talk about dual enrollment students, a lot of times we're talking about students who took 1 or 2 courses. We're not talking, so presumably with more courses, there can be even greater benefit. But this point at the end, there was a really pretty big difference between students who took 1 course versus at least 2 courses. So that's 6 college credits in that last bullet. The students who took at least 6 college credits were, much more, were considerably more likely to benefit. And first-generation students were especially likely to benefit. So early college, high school, again, I think most people know about early college, high schools, and also that, we don't have as much research on early college programs, but they're being structured to approximate what can be done in early college, early or middle college, high school to the extent possible. So for those of you who may not know this, this is the information that came out of the national study by AIR and SRI a few years ago and showed that early college, high school students, when compared to students in a control group, and this was a random assignment study, so they're alike in every way, are more likely to graduate high school, more likely to enroll in college, and more likely to earn a college degree. And one of the things that I'm most impressed with is that the impacts didn't, that basically the achievement gap was being erased. And that's something we've seen in the INCREST data we've looked at too. In the Middle College National Consortium schools we've looked at, we just don't see differences by race, ethnicity, a little bit by gender, but not too much. They found also family income, first-generation status, or previous high school achievement. So those are all important stats. Any thoughts or comments on any of that or questions? Okay, well, let me go ahead and the next section is more research that's been done in colleges and in relation to colleges. But I think for early college people, middle and early colleges are really on that borderline. So knowing the research out of both contexts is important. So this is about some work that we're currently involved in at CCRC, looking at better ways to assess students as they come into college. So what's at stake, as we've said earlier, when you start in developmental education, you're less likely to graduate, and it's associated with that with less good outcomes in general. Developmental education is expensive for the students, for taxpayers. So it's important for it to be available because some students are going to need it if they're going to have any chance at college at all, but it really should be for the students who need to be in those courses. And right now we've got some problems with the placement systems that are being used. So what's going on right now is that most students, when they go to a community college and many four-year colleges, get tested as soon as they walk in the door. Many of them don't know that a test is coming, and it's not uncommon for it not to be taken very seriously. But it turns out that it's a pretty important test because it will determine many times whether you go into developmental or college level courses. Up until last year, there were 2 course tests that were used commonly, Accuplacer and Compass, and now there's only the Accuplacer. So this is to share some research that was done by some people at CCRC, showing that what happens when you place students using a single test is you end up misplacing a lot of students. What they did basically is use a bunch of other predictors to figure out who would be successful in a college-level English or a college-level math course. And when they compared those richer set of predictors with just looking at the exam alone, they found that a lot of students were not being placed appropriately. And a lot of students were too, but a lot were not. And it was more likely that students would be underplaced. In other words, they would end up being placed into a developmental course when they would have been fine to take college-level material. And I should mention that the criteria here was used was a B or better in the course. So if you lowered that standard to a C or better, in other words, the students who could pass, you know, you would have even more students that were being underplaced and more that were being overplaced. So you've got a real issue here. And it's something that those of you who are involved with dual enrollment, I mean, a lot of times you don't have too much control over what the college considers to be college level, but this can perhaps enter your discussions as you talk with people at the college. So what is more predictive? For the most part, and across multiple studies, the best predictor of success in college is the high school GPA. So that's good to know. So these are, what I've got up on the screen are data from from one college that we're working with. We're in the process of working with 7 State University of New York community colleges on a project to look at different kinds of assessments. But what it was looking at was the extent to which GPA alone, that's the first bar, predicted success in college-level courses. The test alone is the second bar. GPA plus the test together. And then a full model that included some other factors like time out of high school, and I don't remember what was included in this, but maybe class rank, something like that. So what you can see here is, I mean, I think the most important takeaway here is that placement tests don't do a great job. Now, I mean, one of the things you might notice is that, especially in English, none of these things do a particularly good job. But if we're going to be placing students using these kinds of measures, let's use the best measure we can. And in most cases, and this, you know, I should make it clear, these figures that are up here are really just for that one college, and these figures vary by college, but the kinds of relationships are fairly consistent. The best predictor, the best single predictor is the high school GPA, and but if you can combine it with some other measures, you're even better off. So different colleges around the country are using different approaches to consider more than one measure. In some places, they're exempting students that have different indications that they could do well in college, and basically saying, you know, if you come in with this level SAT or this level ACT or this level in the state tests, you don't have to take the placement test. So that's what they do in Ohio. In North Carolina, they have kind of a hierarchy, and they'll say if you've got a GPA, you know, a high school GPA of, I think it's 2.6, we'll consider you college level. If you have between a 2.0 and a 2.6, we're going to take into account, you know, the actual coursework you did in college and or the placement test. So they've got, you know, kind of several different measures that kick in. In Wisconsin, at least at one point, I'm not sure this is still going, there were some colleges that had a review panel, so faculty would actually look at a range of measures and individually assess students. That had the advantage of being, you know, pretty fine-grained, but it also had the disadvantage of being very time-intensive. So Minnesota, they're looking at different kinds of decision rules or bans. So if you take something like if you take a test and you place anywhere in this range, we're going to also consider your high school GPA, that kind of thing. And then the algorithm, you would take data at the college from past students, so kind of like that research that I talked about before, and you would predict what blend of measures was best for placing students for future success. So there are different ways you can go about this, and different states and colleges are using different approaches. But it's just something to take into account as you're thinking about how your students are placed into college classes, and maybe talking with people at the college about what could be a better way. So another topic that's big in community colleges these days, and colleges, to some degree four-year colleges, are guided pathways. And that's also something that you may want to be tuned into in early colleges, because students are more and more being encouraged to enter college and begin in at least some big major area. In other words, maybe they're interested in a health career, but they don't know which one. So they might, start in health careers generally, or maybe, they think they might eventually be interested in STEM, So they'll begin taking courses right from the beginning that would be in that area. So more and more students are being encouraged to start in these kinds of pathways. And the reason it's being, this idea is being advanced is that there's been a bunch of work done in psychology, marketing, and behavioral economics, basically, suggesting that more choice isn't always better. It's great to have choices, but what happens a lot of times is that students kind of fall into things, and then they decide that wasn't great for them. And, a lot of times they don't have a lot of information on which to base their choice of courses. So they kind of do trial and error and don't make, really great decisions, and kind of end up taking courses without a real plan, and that happens even more if they're undeclared. And that's more likely to lead to one of two things. One is students taking a bunch more courses than they need, which they then have to pay for, or dropping out early because they're not clear about where they're going with all of this, and it's costing them money. So this idea of guided pathways is being established pretty widely in colleges, and the idea is to have a series of clear roadmaps so that you would have sets of courses that at the beginning, might move toward a kind of set of majors, but then pretty quickly students would choose more specific majors. And they could see what it would take to get themselves from where they are now to finishing up. Now, in some cases, some middle and early colleges are taking a look at those pathways and saying, okay, maybe we should be making sure we offer the first few courses, or that, our dual enrollment courses include the first few courses on several of these pathways that seem more interesting to students. The colleges are also trying to do a better job at incorporating intake processes to help students just, make some good decisions about where they want to go, and then, kind of begin the process of kind of moving into a specific area. And some of that is, offering good on-ramps of study. Sometimes that's a career interest course. Sometimes it's kind of an intro to medical careers course. There can be different ways of doing this. Sometimes it's a first-year experience, or, there's a variety of ways colleges are doing this. But the idea is to help students who, need that kind of extra assistance to figure out where they're going. Another big part of this is trying to kind of speed up the developmental education process. So a lot of times students were going through multiple courses of developmental education when they probably could have done one or maybe two, and done it more quickly and moved on to the next stage. And then embedded advising is a big part of this, trying to be more proactive in working with students, knowing when they're getting off track or running into difficulty, and helping them out. So this is an example of, this is City Colleges of Chicago, and these are the 10 areas that they're using as MetaMajors or kind of introductory majors. And these vary a lot by college and by region, and it depends on, you know, what likely employment opportunities are out there, you know, whether their students are more or less interested in transfer. But they're encouraging all students to start in one of these areas and kind of form an identity within one of these areas and move forward. So I just kind of wanted to share some of that thinking with you. The last thing I'm going to touch on is a couple of types of student supports that have been researched and that seem especially relevant for middle and early colleges. One of them is ALP, Accelerated Learning Program, and that was developed by the Community College of Baltimore County. At least they're the most known for it. And it's a lot like what certainly the Middle College National Consortium schools call Seminar. So what it is basically you've got your regular college class in CCBC. They're most like, you know, they're usually doing this with English 101, although it's gone into some other areas too. And you have a little over half of your students in the class are your regular students who would normally be placed in there, and then you know, maybe another third are students who would typically be in developmental education. They hold the regular class period, and then right before or right after, typically those students that might need the extra help that were placed into developmental ed are going to spend another hour with the same professor, and they're going to work on you know, getting the kinds of supports that will help them to be successful in the class. So they might be, you know, answering any questions that were left over. They might be discussing ideas for an essay that they're working on. They might be talking about just, you know, how to be successful in college more generally, or any issues that are interfering with progress. And, you know, they get to know each other pretty well, and, you know, they've had some really good results. So this is similar. So what's being done in the middle colleges I visited is a lot like this, except the high school teachers typically doing that extra companion class that helps students who are, to make sure that they, you know, understand their assignments and are getting them done on time, and just kind of providing that extra help. So this is some research that's from the ALP website, from CCBC. And you can see that, you know, back in fall of '06, you had, you know, 27% of the students who were passing English 101 after they took the regular developmental course, right? They were placed in developmental, then they would get to English 101. Only 27% were passing. If you go to fall '07, you can see that they're using this combined course. So those same students who would have first gone into the developmental and then into the 101 class, 64% of them are passing English 101 on the first try. So basically, instead of taking those two classes, they're taking one with the extra help, which is kind of like another class, but it's happening at the same time. So you can see this is something that's been pretty successful. The other support that I think is worth mentioning is supplemental instruction. And I haven't heard of this being used as much in middle or early colleges, but the basic idea is having peer support provided by students who have already been through that same class and work outside of class with students who, you know, are going through it now. And so, you know, they have kind of the role model, they have the extra help, they're, you know, getting a chance to discuss some of the readings, you know, with peers. And, you know, this is something that's been widely evaluated. It's been around for quite a long time. And, you know, across different studies, they found that students were earning a final course grade of about 15 percentile points higher than non-participants. So, you know, I think it's a model that's worth looking into. I'm not going to provide a ton of information about it, but just something to think about. So just to wrap up, yeah, I mean, I encourage people to think in terms of reforms or kind of processes rather than just programs as a way to reach all students and making sure that all students have a series of experiences and attainments that can work for them. Using research-based practices, measuring what matters, trying to make sure that when students are, being allowed into or kept out of important experiences like college courses, that it's based on the most important information, and doing whatever possible to make the education pathway easy to follow so that, as students are moving along, they can figure out where they want to go and begin taking the right courses and having the experiences that will get them where they want to go. So I've been talking a whole lot. Anybody have any comments or questions? Well, thanks to everybody for joining us today. It's great to be sharing information with people who are involved in middle and early colleges. I have the greatest admiration and respect for your movement, and hope to run across you at other occasions in the future.